Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast. I am your host, Tanya Vasallo. Have you ever thought about how we all grow up with our beliefs about death, or have you questioned them? What does it mean? How should I feel? How should I act? And this week, I witnessed something that completely shifted my perspective. It happened on Sunday. I was driving I wasn't driving. I was with a driver on my way to pick up my daughter from a play date. And I ran into this unexpected traffic. At first, I was getting impatient. I'm like, ugh, what is going on? There shouldn't be traffic on Sunday. Why are we at a stop? And I started seeing the people of the village walking by. So I thought there must have been some type of ceremony on their way to the temple. But we were at a stop, so I was like, okay, cool. I got curious and I wanted to look out the window, and my driver said cremation. And so it was amazing to me. I wasn't sure if I was understanding correctly that it was a cremation. He was saying it in Balinese because people were joyful. They were dressed in color. There was no black, what I'm used to, in the West, like in Spain and in the US, the funerals that I've been to are all in black. There was color. People were chatting as they were going down in the parade. They were even laughing or giggling, they seemed happy. They didn't seem like this sorrow or sadness. And what was amazing is that they weren't carrying the coffin. It looked like a decorated bed, with a white sheet. They were up on stilts. I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. And that person was covered with a white cloth, and they must have been on their way to do the cremation at a specific location. And then later I got curious. I wanted to research it. So I looked up Balinese cremation ceremonies, and it seems like to them, it has a completely different meaning. They celebrate the soul returning home. That's why there's more of a celebration in the way of how they were interacting. And what it did for me, it just made me reflect on how we in the Western world approach loss with much more heaviness, with the mourning, while here it's seen as a transition, freedom, and a continuation of the soul. It's almost like body's been released and it's transitioning into a different realm, a different place, right? And it just made me wonder how we see death, how we see funerals, our silence, the black clothes, the grief, how we approach it. I know in the Jewish culture from my husband, they hold Shiva, like in Spain with the Catholic way, they're very, very sad, so funerals are so different in different parts of the world, different cultures, right? And it just made me realize, it got me thinking about how sorrow comes not from death itself, but from the stories we've been telling ourselves about it, or that have been passed down in our culture and our traditions. And also it made me think about belief and how belief shapes our emotion. And maybe joy and grief are not so much opposites, but just different doors into love. When I saw all these people just kind of sharing and laughing and talking. And I'm curious, what kind of beliefs did you grow up with about death and loss, and how you're supposed to process grief? Because that's a whole other episode that we could do about processing grief, that it has to look a certain way. Should I be crying? Should I be, and grief is so insidious, right? It shows up in the least expected moment. Maybe you lost someone 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, and suddenly you're just taken over by tears. It comes in waves, right? So I'm curious. I'd just love to hear your reflections and share with me on Substack or on YouTube, in the YouTube comments. And if you find this episode interesting, or that it might help someone that's going through grief right now, share the episode with them. It does help the algorithm. So the more we share, the more we get the message out there. I really appreciate it. So if you've been here with me and listening, making comments, thank you, thank you, thank you. Until our next episode, I'm your host, Tanya Vasallo, and I'm sending you love and courage. If you loved today's episode, it would mean so much if you rate and review The Courage to Be on Apple Podcasts. Not only does it help the show to grow, but it also gets you in the running for something amazing. Every month, I draw one lucky winner to receive a complimentary 7-night, 8-day vacation. You'll get to pick from over 3,000 beautiful resorts worldwide. You just cover the taxes and fees like you would with a travel rewards. Airfare is not included. And if you want to double your chances, along with your Apple Podcast review, leave a couple of comments on YouTube. That counts as a second entry. Just send your screenshots to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and you'll find the email in the show notes too. It only takes a moment, and who knows, your next adventure might be closer than you think. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you on our next episode of the Courage to Be podcast.